Let me tell you about two people I've worked with. The first one, I'll call him James, spent 7 years trying to get rich. He traded options. He bought crypto at the peak of 3 different cycles. He put money into a friend's restaurant. He followed newsletters that promised market-beating returns. He spent hours every week researching stocks, watching financial YouTube, reading about the next big thing. 7 years. And his net worth at the end of it was $34,000. Less than 1 year's salary. The second one, I'll call her Karen, did almost nothing. She set up an automatic transfer on payday. She put money into an index fund every single month for 7 years. She didn't check it obsessively. She didn't change her strategy when the market dropped. She didn't get excited when it went up. She just let it run. 7 years. Her net worth, $187,000. Same time period, roughly similar incomes, completely different outcomes. James was exciting. Karen was boring. And boring won. By a lot. I'm Elizabeth, a financial advisor. And today I want to show you the exact 3-step system that Karen used. The system that works not because it's clever or sophisticated or requires any special knowledge, but because it's so simple that almost nobody screws it up once they actually commit to it. Before I get into the steps, I need to address something directly. Because there's a reason most people never use this system even after they learn about it. It's not because they don't understand it. It's because it doesn't feel like enough. We are wired to believe that good outcomes require complex inputs, that wealth requires sophistication, that if the strategy doesn't feel difficult, it probably isn't working, that there must be something smarter, faster, more exciting out there that the really successful people are doing. There isn't. The financial industry has spent decades and billions of dollars convincing you otherwise. Because boring doesn't sell products. Boring doesn't justify management fees. Boring doesn't need a guru or a newsletter or a proprietary algorithm. Boring doesn't make anyone rich except you. And that's exactly why it works. Step 1. Create the gap, then protect it like your life depends on it. Everything starts here. Before investments, before compound interest, before any of the exciting stuff. The gap. The gap is the distance between what you earn and what you spend. It sounds obvious. But most people have never actually calculated theirs. They have a vague sense that they should be saving more. They know roughly what they earn. They have no idea what they actually spend. So the first thing I do with every new client is sit down and calculate the gap. Not estimate it. Calculate it. Every dollar in, every dollar out every month for the last 3 months. And what I find, almost every single time, is that the gap is smaller than they thought. Sometimes dramatically smaller. Because here's what happens to most people's finances without them noticing. They get a raise. And almost immediately, without any conscious decision, their expenses rise to meet it. Nicer apartment, better car, more dinners out, a few more subscriptions. Each individual upgrade feels reasonable. Justified even. They worked hard. They deserve it. But the gap stays exactly the same. Or gets smaller. Economists call this lifestyle inflation. I call it the silent wealth killer because it happens slowly, invisibly, and it feels like reward rather than damage. Every upgrade feels like progress. But financially, it's the opposite. The people who build real wealth, the Karens of the world, not the Jameses, treat their gap as sacred. When income goes up, the gap goes up. Not the lifestyle, the gap. This requires a specific kind of clarity about what you actually value versus what you've been conditioned to want. I worked with a client once who was spending $340 a month on a gym membership at a premium facility. He went maybe 6 times a month. When I pointed out he was spending $57 per visit, he looked genuinely shocked. He hadn't thought about it that way. He'd just been paying the membership because that's what people at his income level did. It was part of the identity, not part of the enjoyment. He canceled it, joined a $30 a month gym, went the same 6 times a month and felt exactly the same. That's $310 a month back into the gap. $3,720 a year. Invested over 20 years at 8% returns, that's $185,000. from one subscription he didn't actually value. Now multiply that by every purchase you're making out of identity rather than genuine enjoyment. The car that's slightly nicer than you need. The apartment in the neighborhood that signals the right things. The clothes that perform success to people you barely know. Strip all of that out, and your gap gets very wide, very fast. The goal is not to deprive yourself. The goal is to get brutally honest about what actually makes your life better versus what you're buying, because society told you that people at your income level buy those things. Most people, when they do this examination honestly, find that their actual cost of a genuinely enjoyable life is significantly lower than what they're currently spending. That's the gap. Find it. Widen it. Then protect it from every force that will try to close it. Raises, bonuses, peer pressure, your own desire to feel successful in ways that other people can see. Step 2, automate it and invest it in the right place. Once you have the gap, the single most important thing you can do is make it disappear before you can touch it. Not willpower, not discipline, not reminding yourself every month to transfer money to investments. Automation. On payday, before the money hits your checking account, a fixed percentage is already gone, already invested. You never see it. You never make a decision about it. You never have to fight the temptation to spend it because it was never available to spend in the first place. This sounds simple. It is simple. And it is the single most effective financial behavior I have ever observed in the clients who actually build wealth. Because here's the thing about willpower. It's finite. It depletes. On a Tuesday evening when you're tired and stressed and your friend is texting about a trip to Lisbon, your willpower to protect your savings rate is essentially zero. The version of you at 9 p.m. on a bad day is not the version of you that should be making financial decisions. Automation removes that version of you from the equation entirely. The decision was made once in a calm moment of clarity, and now it just happens every month without negotiation. So that's the mechanism, but now the more important question, where does the money actually go? And here's where I want to be very direct with you, because most financial content either oversimplifies this or overcomplicates it. The answer depends on one thing. Do you genuinely understand business? Not do you follow markets, not do you read financial news, not do you have opinions about which sectors are going to perform well next year. Do you actually understand how businesses work at a fundamental level? How they generate cash, what gives them durable competitive advantages, how to assess whether a management team is allocating capital intelligently, how to tell the difference between a company with a real moat and one that just looks good in a bull market? If the answer is no, and I want to be honest, the answer is no for the vast majority of people, including many people who think the answer is yes, then index funds. That's it, a simple, low-cost index fund that tracks the total market. Historically, around 8% annual returns. No stock picking, no timing, no strategy beyond buying consistently and holding forever. This is not the exciting answer, but it is the correct answer for most people. And the gap between an index fund and the average individual investor's actual returns is significant. Studies consistently show that people who try to beat the market underperform it, largely because they make emotional decisions at exactly the wrong moments. Index funds work precisely because they remove you from the equation. And for most people, removing yourself from the equation is the single best thing you can do for your returns. But if you work in a specific industry and you genuinely understand the competitive dynamics of that industry, if you can look at a company and assess with real knowledge whether its advantages are durable, whether its business model is honest and sustainable, whether its cash flows are real and growing, then you may have an actual edge. A nurse who deeply understands healthcare operations may genuinely be able to evaluate certain healthcare companies better than a generalist fund manager. A software engineer who has spent 15 years in enterprise SaaS understands the switching costs and customer dynamics of that world in a way that most investors don't. A supply chain manager who has worked with manufacturers across 3 continents has insight into certain industrial businesses that simply isn't available from reading a 10K. That kind of knowledge, real, earned, industry-specific knowledge, can be a legitimate edge. And if you have it, there's a reasonable argument for allocating a portion of your investments to companies you genuinely understand. Companies with honest management, Stable, predictable cash flows, real competitive advantages that aren't dependent on hype or the current market cycle. Companies that are, frankly, as boring as the system itself, not because they're exciting, but because you understand them well enough to hold through volatility without panicking, because you know the business well enough to distinguish between a temporary setback and a permanent deterioration. The critical word there is genuinely, not think you understand, not follow closely. Genuinely understand, at a level that would let you explain in specific detail why this company will still have pricing power in 15 years. If you have to think hard about whether you qualify, you don't qualify. Index funds. Warren Buffett tells regular people to buy index funds and hold them forever. He doesn't do that with his own money, but he also has 50 years of experience evaluating businesses and an analytical framework that very few people on Earth have developed to his level. The difference between his approach and yours isn't strategy. It's genuine capability built over decades. Know which category you're in. Be honest about it. And then automate accordingly. Step 3. Ignore it. This is the step nobody talks about, and it's the hardest one. Not because it requires work, because it requires the opposite of work. It requires you to do nothing, consistently, for years, in the face of every instinct you have screaming at you to do something. Let me tell you what the market looks like over any given decade. It goes up, then it drops significantly, and financial media declares the beginning of a crisis. Then it recovers, then it goes up further, then something unexpected happens and it drops again, and everyone says this time is different. Then it recovers again. Then it goes up further than anyone predicted. This has happened with variations throughout the entire history of modern markets. The people who got wealthy from investing are almost universally the people who stayed in through every drop. The people who got hurt are the ones who sold when it felt most dangerous, which is always, with perfect mathematical cruelty, near the bottom. Checking your portfolio constantly doesn't make you a better investor. It makes you a worse one. Because every time you check it during a downturn, you are exposing yourself to the possibility of making an emotional decision that will cost you years of compounding. The optimal portfolio checking frequency for most people is somewhere between quarterly and never. I'm serious. I have clients who set up their automatic investments, check their statements once a year to make sure everything is working correctly, and otherwise pay no attention to their portfolio. These are consistently among my wealthiest clients, not because they're smarter, because they removed the most dangerous variable from the equation, themselves. James, the client I mentioned at the beginning, failed not because his strategies were wrong in theory. He failed because he couldn't ignore. Every drop triggered a sell. Every rally triggered a buy. Every exciting opportunity triggered a reallocation. He was constantly optimizing, constantly reacting, constantly certain that this moment required action. All of that action destroyed value. Every single time. Karen succeeded because she did the opposite of what every instinct told her to do during a market downturn. She kept buying. Automatically. Because the automation didn't give her a choice. She didn't have to be brave or disciplined or visionary. She just had to not cancel the automatic transfer. And she didn't, so her money kept buying index funds at the bottom of 2020, at the bottom of 2022. At every correction in between, she didn't know she was buying at the bottom. She was just following the system, but the system was designed so that she would keep buying regardless of what the market was doing. That is the entire genius of this step. Not insight, not timing, just consistency enforced by automation. Now, let me tell you about the enemy of this system, because there is one. And it's not the market. It's you. More specifically, it's the version of you that appears at specific moments and will try to convince you to abandon the system. The first moment is a market crash. Your portfolio drops 25%, maybe 35%. It looks like everything is falling apart. Financial media is in full crisis mode. Smart-sounding people are explaining in detail why this time is genuinely different. And the voice in your head starts asking, what if they're right? What if I should move to cash? What if I wait until things stabilize and then get back in? Every version of this logic is wrong. It has always been wrong. The people who acted on it have always regretted it. But in the moment, with your portfolio down 30% and doom everywhere you look, the system will feel naive. It will feel like something designed for normal times that simply doesn't apply to this particular crisis. It applies. It always applies. Stay in the system. The second moment is a raise or a bonus. Suddenly there's more money available and your lifestyle hasn't caught up yet. And the voice starts suggesting that you've been good long enough, that you deserve to enjoy this. That a slightly nicer apartment or a better car would be completely reasonable given what you're earning now. This is lifestyle inflation dressed up as reward. The correct response is to increase your automatic investment amount by the same percentage as your raise and leave your lifestyle exactly where it is. Every dollar of raise that goes into investments instead of lifestyle is compounding for 30 years. Every dollar of raise that goes into a nicer apartment is gone by the end of the month. The math is not ambiguous. The third moment is watching someone else win big. A colleague buys a stock that doubles in 3 months. Someone in your circle made a fortune on something you'd never heard of. And suddenly the boring system feels like settling, like you're leaving money on the table, like the real opportunity is somewhere else. It's not. For every person you hear about who made a fortune on a single bet, there are dozens you don't hear about who lost everything on the same type of bet. The visibility is asymmetric. Winners talk, losers disappear. Your boring system, running quietly in the background, will outperform the vast majority of exciting strategies over any 20-year period. Not because it's smarter, because it's consistent and it keeps you from destroying your own returns with emotional decisions. Stay boring, especially when boring feels most wrong. Let me show you what this system actually produces over time. Take someone making $70,000 a year. Not exceptional income, solidly average. They create a gap of 30%, $21,000 a year, or $1,750 a month. They automate it into a low-cost index fund. They ignore it. Year 5, roughly $125,000 invested, starting to feel real. Year 10, roughly $310,000. Passive income at 4% withdrawal rate, $12,400 a year. Year 15, roughly $620,000. Passive income, $24,800 a year. Year 20, roughly $1,100,000. Passive income, $44,000 a year, more than their original salary. Generated entirely by money working while they sleep, $70,000 a year income. 30% savings rate. 20 years of boring consistency. Financial independence. No crypto. No stock picking. No timing the market. No guru. No newsletter. No strategy beyond the 3 steps I just described. This is what average looks like when it's applied consistently. And consistent average beats inconsistent excellence every single time in this game. Because this game is won by staying in it, not by being brilliant at it. James came back to me 2 years ago. He was 41. He'd stopped the trading, stopped the schemes, stopped looking for the edge. He was ready to be boring. We set up the system, calculated his gap, automated his investments into an index fund. He didn't have industry-specific knowledge worth betting on, and he was honest enough to admit it. Set up the automation. And I told him the same thing I tell everyone at this point. Now, ignore it. He called me 6 months later to tell me he'd resisted checking his portfolio during a market dip, that he'd kept the automation running, that it was the hardest thing he'd done. I told him that's exactly right. The hardest part of this system is trusting something that feels too simple to work. It works. It has always worked. For average people with average incomes who were willing to be boring long enough for the math to do what math does. The gap, the automation, the ignoring. 3 steps. No excitement required. I'm Elizabeth. If this is the clearest explanation of this system you've heard, share it with someone who's still waiting for something more sophisticated. And I'll see you in the next one.